I'm Haley B. Miller, and this is Ohio Politics Explained, a podcast where you give us 15 minutes and we give you all the news you need to sound smart and impress your friends. Welcome to another episode of Ohio Politics Explained. Today, we'll discuss the latest action on property taxes, an uptick in out-of-state abortions, how abortion opponents want to change health class, and why marijuana companies are suing the state. Back in the studio is Jesse Balmert.
Happy to be here. So many topics to talk about.
So many. And let's begin with everyone's favorite, property taxes. A group assembled by Governor Mike DeWine released recommendations for how Ohio should tackle rising taxes. The highlights include a deferral program for seniors and a circuit breaker, which helps homeowners who spend more of their money on property taxes. They also support some bills introduced by lawmakers with some tweaks here and there. How did these ideas go over?
Well, I think Republican leaders are open to hearing what the governor is talking about, but didn't say, gosh, thanks so much. Great list of ideas. We shall implement these immediately. So it'll be interesting to see whether some of these proposals get added to other legislation that the House is expected to pass as soon as next week, or, just what happens with some of these ideas.
Yeah, and some of these are modifications of things that DeWine vetoed in the budget. So, for example, DeWine vetoed a proposal to get rid of emergency and replacement levies, and the task force that he put together said maybe don't get rid of them entirely, but let's put limits on these, especially with emergency levies. That recommendation, though, came too late because the Ohio Senate voted on Wednesday to override that veto. And since the House did that earlier in the summer, that's now law. So it's kind of interesting to see that dynamic play out, too.
Yeah, I know Governor DeWine in his budget had the most number of vetoes that he had ever issued, and a number of them were related to these property tax ideas because he wanted more time on these issues. But I think lawmakers are saying, no, we liked these policies and we're running out of time, particularly with a group trying to make the November 2026 ballot to eliminate property taxes entirely.
Right. And I think there was a hope that by putting some of the stuff in the budget, that homeowners would see changes on their January tax bills, or at least know that lawmakers are working on this issue. But there's just not a lot that's in place in time enough to affect people in January. So there may be some Ohioans who see increases in their property taxes. And that's really a fear for lawmakers, especially with this amendment floating out there.
Yeah, and it's also just balancing so many interests because you have schools and different local organizations that rely on this money that would much rather it not get cut. And so you're trying to balance all of these interests that lawmakers and the governor are listening to, and what's the right solution.
Next up is abortion. The Ohio Department of Health released data showing abortions in Ohio did not spike after the Reproductive Rights Amendment passed in 2023. There were about 22,000 abortions in 2024, which was less than a 1% decline from the year prior. But we did see an increase in out-of-state abortions. What's going on with those?
Yeah, so you're seeing Ohio as a location where people from surrounding states that have abortion bans or just severe restrictions can go because Ohio voters approved that 2023 constitutional amendment, which protects access to abortion. So it's not like a dramatic increase, but it's certainly more than we saw prior to that amendment and prior to Roe v. Wade being overturned.
Yeah, it's so interesting after years and years of putting abortion restrictions on the books in Ohio that Ohio is now a destination essentially for people who need this procedure done, because states like Kentucky, Indiana, it's much harder to get an abortion there now.
Yeah, that's really been the impact of the U.S. Supreme Court's decision from 2022, which is a patchwork of laws. And so you have some states that have some policies in other states that, allow it or completely restrict it. And so it really is depending on where you live, how much access you have to this particular procedure.
And on a semi-related topic, an Ohio Republican has introduced a bill to require students to watch a video of fetal development in health class. Opponents of abortion have pushed for this in other states. Walk us through the details here.
Yeah, so like you said, this isn't a proposal that's starting in Ohio, but there's this 3-minute video that was created by a group that opposes abortion that walks through kind of from fertilization till birth. There was this isn't new to Ohio, but other states have proposed this, and it's essentially a video that was created by an organization that is opposed to abortion that walks through from fertilization till birth. And those who oppose abortion, including this bill sponsor, say that this is, scientific, factual information that people need to know. Opponents are saying this is propaganda being created by an organization that is opposed to abortion. And this particular bill in Ohio would start in the 3rd grade, which is before at least I had sex education in Ohio.
Something I feel like we've seen play out since the amendment passed in 2023 is opponents of abortion trying to navigate the new legal landscape, still further their beliefs and policies that support their beliefs without, of course, violating the Constitution. Do you feel like this is another example of that?
Yeah, I think you saw from groups that oppose the 23 amendment a kind of post-mortem where they said we have to change people's opinions on abortion rather than just restrict it entirely, which is prohibited by this new amendment. And so you're seeing things like this. You have another bill that would require 24 hours notification, whether via email or so forth, kind of like a waiting period. That was a similar concept is on hold in court. You're seeing very few lawmakers just go directly at the amendment. There is one proposal to ban abortion entirely and treat it like murder or homicide, but that's not a super popular position on the right now.
Our final topic for today is marijuana. Some cannabis companies are suing the state, saying the rules for recreational marijuana are too strict and violate the voter-backed law. The Division of Cannabis Control is in charge of setting rules, but it's a very slow process. And businesses say the guidance they're getting just doesn't jive with industry standards. What are some of the examples in the lawsuit?
I'm so glad you asked, because the most interesting thing of this was when the state told the Ohio Cannabis Company that they couldn't include the phrase Merry Christmas in advertisements or promotional deals because that's a holiday that is geared toward children. And so it's just really interesting how the state has chosen to interpret these restrictions, which are certainly the heart behind them is to not encourage children to access marijuana. But the way that's interpreted is just kind of interesting.
Yeah, and to that end as well, there are different strain names for cannabis that have been rejected by the state, in part because regulators feel like those names would appeal to children. You have things like strawberry shortcake, for example, but cannabis strains are known for having kind of quirky names. It's pretty common in other states, and I think business owners here are saying, we're just trying to do things the way they've always been done. We're trying to run businesses, and they feel like the state is making that harder.
Yeah, and your story points this out, but this is certainly an issue, but it's kind of a side issue to the larger debate that we're still having over the recreational marijuana amendment that passed in 23 and lawmakers still trying to make changes to that, but they haven't settled on anything. Meanwhile, we have hemp, and there's so much still outstanding.
And one more thing before you go. A Republican from Licking County doesn't want people to marry AI. Representative Thad Claggett introduced a bill to bar AI personhood, meaning it also couldn't control real estate or bank accounts. I think Claggett has seen the movie Her.